Okay, good evening. Last session, 25 minutes between this and the reception. So let's see if we can't blast through that 25 minutes, but make it interesting and worthwhile. So why is getting to the cloud so hard, and does it really need to be? I've been in IT for many, many years, and recently, in the past 6 months, 8 months or so, I started helping a lot of customers start moving to the cloud as well, and start having those conversations. And I've noticed some trends and some things, and usually it's a lot of big customers who are moving to the cloud, and they're heavily invested and adopted. But in some of these side conversations, talking to some of the smaller customers, it's been interesting, some of the challenges and difficulties for people moving to the cloud. So what I wanted to do was start off with the most common reason that I hear for why people don't want to move to the cloud. And that's because the world that they live in is safe. It's a big field of flowers, and they don't need anything, and their users are protected, and their users all won't click on Chris Sullivan's phishing attacks, and their admins protect their infrastructure, and everything is just good. And so they don't need to, they don't need the cloud. They don't need any of the security benefits. They don't need any of the services that they could get by coming to a cloud provider like Azure. The reality for most cases, though, is that for most of us, we live in a dark, scary forest, right? And there's monsters, and there are things with eyes that are creeping at us. And we don't know what they are, and we're not really sure when they're going to come at us, and we're not really sure how they're going to get to us, but we can know that they're there because we keep hearing things. And so one of the questions is, if you're stuck in a dark, scary forest, you've kind of got two options, right? You could either curl up and pretend like everything's going to be okay, or you can run, right? And a lot of times, just run, just start to adopt, start to fix some of the problems is going to be your best bet to get out of that forest. So one of the things that I want to do is I want to talk about like 5 easy ways to adopt the cloud, really quick, things that you could take home today and start to apply in your own environment, okay? But before I start, the first thing that's going to happen as you go back to your company, as you go back to your customers, is, sure, I'd love to do that, but we're missing something. We're not going to satisfy 100% of your requirements, right? If the solution is not perfect, then why would we bother, right? And so perfect becomes the enemy of good. Right? Most of the time, you can get away with bringing drastic improvements into your environment by moving forward even when you don't have everything exactly as you might like. So how do we start? Well, we're going to start by securing our on-prem, right? Because if we're talking about moving to the cloud, then we're going to be in hybrid for a long, long time. And if we're going to be in hybrid for a long time, then let's talk about securing our on-prem. And so what we want to do is start off by looking at the tiered admin model, right? If your on-prem infrastructure is not something that your cloud is going to be able to rely on, then your cloud's not going to be able to be protected either. So we're going to need to look at the tiered admin model, and we've got 3 tiers here. Really, we're kind of focused on tier 0. And the interesting thing about tier 0 is everybody says, oh, that's the domain controllers. Yes, true. That is the domain controllers. It's also your federation servers. It's also your directory sync servers. It's also your provisioning system. Potentially, it can expand as deep down as some of your HR data flows, right? It's anything that will be able to inject those rights and inject those attributes that are being evaluated, the policies are being applied on. That's going to be your tier 0. Of course, there's the flip side of tier 0, which is that as soon as you expand it too much, you're not able to lock down your tier 0, and it becomes too big and unwieldy, and you run into a boil the ocean problem. right? So you want to view Tier 0 as your identity infrastructure, okay? Tier 1 is your application, your general services. Tier 2 being your devices and workstations. But really, if you just get some improvements into Tier 0, you're going to be doing great. That's protecting your administrators. Protecting your infrastructure, take something like Azure ATP. Bring it in, deploy it, start to get some of the benefits from the machine learning that's available. Take some of the data that's hitting your domain controllers, some of that activity that's occurring on your network, push that up. We're going to run the behavior analytics for you. We'll give you the dashboard. We're going to collect that, analyze it for you, send those alerts back down. Oftentimes, you'll find out that things are happening in your network that you had no idea were going on. Like clickers. There we go. Cool, so you get a decent foundation started. Next thing you want to do is just connect to the cloud. Okay? So, enable your directory sync. As you look, Azure AD Connect, hook it up, start syncing up your users. And then you're going to look at authentication. And there's multiple different ways for authentication. For those of you who've been coming to Identiverse for years, because I see a lot of familiar faces out here from whenever I've been doing talks here before, ADFS, federation technology, there's a lot of simpler ways to do this now. Pass-through authentication, password hash sync, federated authentication with password hash sync, pass-through auth with password hash sync. Why do I keep saying password hash sync? Because password hash sync allows us to start bringing back some of those leaked credential data back to you, so you can find out when you have some users who have passwords that are compromised. Of course, it's also that trigger because all the security people just start cringing, right? And they're saying, oh, but I don't want to sync my passwords. Fortunately for me, as I was putting this deck together today, someone made a small mistake. And Mark Morrow, who's in the audience, challenged all of you at Identiverse to meet him at the booth tonight and convince him why password hash sync is not, why you should not turn on password hash sync. I encourage you all to go have that discussion. If somebody does come up, this is Mark raising his hand, if somebody does come up and convince him of a reason that does not include costing Microsoft employees money, then there's a group of Microsoft employees who are all going to donate to Seattle Charity. So we've got a bounty out on Mark now, so bring your best shots. Simplifying your password experience. So April, a little bit over a year ago, actually might have been almost 2 years ago now, Microsoft released a bunch of research guidance around improving password experience, okay? Eliminating the complexity, eliminating the frequent mandatory password resets. One of the challenging things about this, though, was the ban common passwords, number 4. That sounds great, but how do you do that, right? It's like, are you allowed to get rid of things if people are still using bad passwords? So it turns out that if you enable self-serve password reset in the cloud, we'll take care of that for you, okay? So all of the cloud infrastructure will enforce banned password lists, okay? So we'll look and say, oh, hey, Seahawks is probably a bad word to be using in your password, at least certainly in Seattle. Actually, possibly here in Boston, too. So enabling self-service password reset. Now, unlike some of the others, this is one of those that end users will notice, right? So it requires a little bit of education, but we already want to educate users on having better passwords. But what does this help for you on-prem? Because the vast majority of your passwords of your users are going to just press Control-Alt-Delete and change their passwords there. So we now have the ability to take Microsoft's cloud banned password list and bring that down on-prem for you. Okay? And this actually, you manage it from the cloud. It lets you insert your own bad words that might be company specific for you. So if you're at Microsoft, Windows might be a bad word, but if you're at Starbucks, latte might be a bad word for you to include in your password. And what we're going to do is we're going to take that data, combine it all together, sync it down to your environment, and push that out to your domain controllers so that your domain controllers, anytime those users hit Control-Alt-Delete, are going to be able to evaluate that password, make sure it doesn't include any of those banned words, do that fuzzy matching, so replacing the A's with @ signs and S's with dollars and 3's with E's, things like that. And we're going to give you that same experience. So this is going to let you have that cloud experience on-prem. Quick question.
Do you allow that in a non-Microsoft product if we have our own self-service portal that's not built on Microsoft?
Can you use the same list? The list actually so I think the question was, if you have a separate self-serve password capability, would this still work? Because this is enforced on the domain controllers, then it'll still apply because your password portal is still going to try to enforce that password change on the domain controllers. So real numbers. This is from internal at Microsoft, from our deployment, because you would think that a large company filled with highly technical savvy people would choose good passwords, and if you thought that, you would be wrong. In a 7-day period, we had just under 60,000 password changes and resets, of which we had 16,000 that were blocked because they contained bad words. So the system works, and we know we have the data to support now that your user base is choosing bad words or choosing passwords that contain bad words. So there is going to be a lot of value to pushing in a system like this. Next thing, let's talk about our applications. So we've secured our infrastructure, we've connected to the cloud, we've taken our users and made them more secure. We've even, with those passwords, we can start to get rid of that complexity requirement, which makes our users happy. And now we want to enable our cloud applications. And so we're able to take our on-prem applications and publish them to the cloud. Now this is important because any conversation that starts with, all you have to do is rewrite all of your applications to make them work with the cloud is a complete non-starter, right? But this way we can take all of the policy and security and behavioral benefits of the cloud and light them up for your on-prem applications. Okay, so publishing your applications using Azure AD App Proxy out to the cloud will let you do things like get those behavioral analytics, get the enforced conditional access policies. And last but not least, which is coming in right about on time, last but not least, conditional access and identity protection. Okay? Conditional access. Chris was actually alluding to the conditional access capabilities at the end of his session when he was talking about risk analysis and being able to process authentications in real time. Conditional access is the policy engine that allows us to do things like when your users are coming in from the internet, enforce multi-factor auth. When users are having those time distance incongruities, to block them or to flag them. We want to be able to do things like when users are on the corporate network, they just have a seamless login experience. And this is all with the attempt to be transparent to the users. The people who should see these conditional access policies are the bad guys. It's interesting because a lot of times conditional access conversations get all caught up in device management. And because a lot of the conditional access conversations start with, all I need to do is manage all of the iPhones and Android devices in my environment, then they're non-starters, because those are massive projects that take a long, long time. But there's a lot that conditional access policies can do just by looking at the user behavior, the applications that they're going to, and then enforcing things like multi-factor auth or restrictions around when and where they're able to access. And identity protection. Identity protection is the risk-based, machine learning-based analytics engine that is going to be able to give you this dashboard or generate those events and help you establish those policies so that we can start to say things like, this user, we know that they have leaked credentials on the internet, so let's take some action. Let's force them to do a password reset. For a user, we can look at their behavior and we know that, hey, you know, this person doesn't normally log in from the Ukraine at 3 o'clock in the morning. Maybe we should flag that. And allows you to tie in with those conditional access policies so that you can take the actions that you would want to be able to take. So you could generate the alerts so your so your security operations team could go and investigate them, because maybe that's what you want to do. Maybe you want to block the users until someone can come through and reconcile that event. Depends on what the application would be. So there's 5 easy things that you could do for getting to the cloud, and of those 5, really only one of them touches the end users, right? So protecting your on-prem is really going to be an administrative and security function. Connecting to the cloud is only going to impact your administrators. Simplifying the password experience, that's going to change your end user experience. So if you've already got an existing on-premises password experience, maybe you don't need to go to SSPR, but you certainly want to take advantage of the banned password capability and integrate that into your system. Enabling on-prem applications, your users will certainly see that because all of a sudden things start to work. And that only makes them happy, right? And then conditional access and identity protection, the bad guys are going to be the ones who see those, right? Your end users might notice a little bit. Mostly it's going to be your security operations team and your administrators who are going to notice that, because all of a sudden people are going to be blocked when they should be. So that was a lot of technology and sort of tactical things. What we did was we built the foundation, though, so that you could start to think of these business-oriented scenarios as you move forward. You could start to have the conversations of things like, I've got these protected applications, or I've got these critical applications that I want to protect, and how can I do that? I want to enforce my users to have multi-factor auth whenever they're coming from the internet, or whenever they're going to a mission-critical app, even if they're from the corporate network. We're providing tools in your toolbox so that you can start to build these business scenarios and these security scenarios that will allow you to deliver the value that you get from putting in the effort of adopting the cloud. And Amelia Earhart, I think she summarized it best, one of my favorite quotes from her. So, the most effective way to do it is just do it. Right? A lot of these things that I've talked about, you could go back and just start. You could start with your internal IT team. There's a lot of things that you can do that aren't going to impact your end users. It's not going to surface in front of some login screen. It's not going to change some behavior. If anything, it's only going to make people happier because they'll suddenly notice that, oh, my password didn't expire again. Or they'll notice that, hey, I can get to this application. Momentum is critical. As you start your cloud journey and start adopting the cloud, getting some of these applications out there, getting some of these changes put in place, keep that momentum going. When you're certainly, almost definitely going to run into scenarios that aren't going to work for you. That's okay. I would challenge everyone, as you're at Identiverse over the course of this next week, or next several days, you can sit and think of all of the reasons not to do something. I would love to be able to do that if only this service did something, right? If only that gap was filled. Or, preferably, I'd recommend take a look at what everyone's talking about, figure out how you can get the value from it, even if it's not perfect, establish those foundational services, and then drive that forward in your environment and start gaining that value immediately, because we're only going to bring more security, better user experience, even if it's not absolutely perfect for you. And that is the single most thing that makes getting to the cloud hard, is when you're waiting for everything to be perfect. Otherwise, thank you very much. We're right on time.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions?
Oh, sorry. Yes?
I have one question about your password policy slide.
Uh-huh.
Your recommendation was 8 characters, and your recommendation was 8 characters and to ban common words in passwords.
Correct.
Why not just expand the length of the password and allow any characters or any words to be used? So rubber buggy.
Yeah,
Microsoft is the best company on the planet would be a much stronger password than an 8-character password.
Absolutely. In fact, the guidance that you see that comes from NIST and from the password research is minimum 8-character, no maximum. Maximum may have some technology limits depending on legacy applications and things like that, or other systems that have upper bounds. But if someone wants to have rubber baby buggy bumper as their password, then we'd certainly allow that. What we don't want to do is we don't want to allow people to have their password be Seahawks, where the A is turned into an @ symbol. Right? That's the more common scenario that we're actually seeing.
Right, but if you increase the minimum password length, then you eliminate that possibility, and they can use that, with other characters to meet the minimum password length.
Yeah, and with the corresponding impact to the user community and having that education. There's a lot of people who just aren't interested, in a lot of users who will rebel, for lack of a better term, against requiring 18, 20, 25 character passwords, passphrases.
But the upside to selling it to them is, hey, you don't have to change your password anymore unless it gets compromised.
It could. I think the experience that we've had, because if you think of several years ago, we had the whole passphrase conversation, right? And if passphrases would have taken off and would have worked, and we would have seen those out in the environment, then I think a lot of this would have been solved. Unfortunately, they didn't, and so now what we're doing is we're trying to be less impactful to the users while still driving uniqueness into the password environment. Thanks.